Okay, chapter 6, the classical era, and we're going to look at the West. So this is classical kind of meaning the best of the West at the time. We're going to look at the Persians, the Greeks, and the Romans. So part 1, intro, and we'll look at Persia. So during the classical era, early civilizations spread beyond the river valleys, so they leave the river valleys that we had talked about in the last chapter. Some of these civilizations achieved enough power to conquer their neighbors and create these huge empires, some of the biggest the world has ever known. So this time is when the civilizations also began to reflect more on morality and the meaning of life. So they actually had more free time on their hands, and they started to really look at morality and really why we are living on Earth. So as a result, many of the world's first major religions emerge. So these same civilizations develop institutions, system of thoughts, and cultural styles that still influence today. We get a lot of our ideas from the Greeks and the Romans especially. So their art, their music, their literature set the standards against which later works would be judged. So we still look back at their achievements and kind of judge it, kind of compared to what we've done today. So people still admire the marble statues of the Greek sculptors. They read Greek playwrights. They read Greek philosophers, and all this, 2,000 years later. So for these reasons, we refer to these classical civilizations, meaning the civilizations of the highest rank. So major questions, these will be the 3 short answers. These will be in your sections, and they'll be on the final exam, the final test at the end of the chapter. So what factors caused the rise of Persia, Greece, and Rome? What were the major accomplishments of these classical civilizations? And how were the classical civilizations shaped by their religious and philosophical beliefs and by the rule of law? So these are some of the different areas that we're looking at. This is Greece. It's kind of covered up, but this is the Roman Empire, and then eventually we're going to go over the area of Persia, and we'll go over that first. So here are the different terms. Those will be in your Quizlet. That way you can study those. You're going to need to study those for the first section review that you have. So the Persians. And Persian Empire, huge area, all the way from Greece, from Egypt, the Nile River, all the way to the Indus. So pretty much all of the 4 river valleys. So the Medes and the Persians lived in the Middle East, and they lived around the Iranian plateau between the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf. And in 550 BC, the Persian ruler Cyrus the Great united these 2 people. So he conquers the Medes, actually what he does. He then expanded Persia's territory westward by conquering Lydia, Babylonia, and then eastward by conquering territories all the way out to the Indus River. So here's an example of some of the Persian architecture. They're going to have the arch, and it's going to be the pointed arch. And then the geometry that they put into their art, and these are, of course, the stained glass windows. So here's Cyrus the Great, probably the greatest ruler of the Persians. And these are the areas that we're talking about. So they spread all the way to Lydia, they went into Babylonia, and eventually, later on after Cyrus, they're going to go into Egypt. So the son of Cyrus the Great conquered Egypt. And then the next great ruler, Darius, he unified the Persian Empire by building a network of public roads. Great emperors will build these public roads to connect their empires. He also introduced a uniform set of weights and measures. It used to be city to city had different weights, they had different measurements, and then he also established several capital cities. Persia was now larger than any other empire up to that time. It stretched for more than 3,000 miles from the Nile to the Indus River. Persians controlled a vast empire by dividing it into provinces, kind of like states, and each one of these was ruled by a local official who was loyal to the Persian king. So the Persians collected tribute, which was a payment, kind of a sign of submission. So it's like taxes and taxes from these provinces. Although they paid tribute, the provinces profited from this extensive trade throughout the Persian Empire. So the roads, they paid for things, but the roads also helped them in their economy. And here's another picture of some palaces in Persia. And then the Persian religion. So at first, like the other groups that we talked about other than the Hebrews, the Persians worshiped many gods, so they're polytheistic. And in 570 BC, a new religion was introduced by the religious leader Zoroaster. Zoroastrianism taught that there were only two gods. So you had the god of truth, the god of light, and the god of goodness. And then, of course, the opposite, you had the god of darkness and of evil. So the whole universe was a battleground between these two forces. Those who led good lives would eventually go to heaven, and while those who were evil would be doomed to a fiery hell. So you see a lot of Christian ideas that come from Zoroastrianism. And here's a painting, and it is still practiced in some of those areas today. And here's Zoroaster here himself. So from the Lydians, the Persians learned the practice of using coins. So under the rule of Darius, citizens were encouraged to use coins to purchase goods instead of trading. So Persians were able to move from a bartering economy to a money economy. The use of coins greatly improved trade throughout the empire. The Persians also built hundreds of miles of roads using gravel and stone. And here's a good picture of their roads. Here's a good picture of their coins. So the Persian Royal Road was 1,500 miles long with more than 100 stations holding fresh horses. So what they would do is they would ride these horses pretty much as fast as they could, stop at a station, get a new fresh horse, and then go on from there. So these roads fostered the feeling of unity within the Persian Empire. Darius established a postal system to make communication easier within the Persian Empire. That's why you had these holding stations for fresh horses. And then couriers, these are people who traveled, carried letters over these new roads.